нас и ждет, безусловно, победа.
Putin stopped trying to win a war and started trying to win the story about the war instead. And it starts with a decision so desperate, so strange, that even the top Russian commanders who ordered it must have known how badly it could end. An entire Russian army spent months trying to push that line forward. Thousands of soldiers were thrown into the effort. Hundreds of vehicles rolled toward a single goal, which was to break through and open the road to a major Ukrainian city. That effort failed. But then Russian commanders drew up a plan that sounds almost too clever to fail. They decided to send in small teams of soldiers quietly behind Ukrainian lines with no weapons at all. These soldiers carried cameras instead of rifles. They carried folded flags instead of body armor. Their mission had nothing to do with capturing real ground. It was to fake capturing that ground, to walk into villages Russia never actually controlled, to film themselves standing inside those villages, and to hand that footage straight to Russian state television as proof of a victory that had never actually happened. Think about what that decision really means. A modern military backed by satellites, artillery, and an entire war economy had been reduced to sending unarmed men to stage a photo opportunity inside enemy territory. Nobody wanted to do this. It happened because every other option had already run out. This became one of the strangest military operations to come out of the entire war. And every single man sent to carry it out ended up exactly where Moscow never wanted its cameras pointed, which was sitting in Ukrainian custody. 64 soldiers were captured. They were taken across 5 separate villages during a mission that was never supposed to involve a single shot being fired. Somewhere in the gap between what Russian television needed and what these soldiers were actually capable of pulling off, real men had to carry that risk on their backs. They had no rifles and no backup, only a camera, a flag, and orders to disappear into territory that Ukraine had already locked down tight. Whatever they had been told to expect out there, it clearly was not this. None of that makes any sense on its own, though. To understand why an army would send its own soldiers out to fake a war it could no longer win for real, you first have to see what broke months earlier along a stretch of front that was supposed to deliver Russia's biggest win of the year and instead became one of its most expensive failures. This all unfolded along a stretch of front called the relied direction inside Zaporizhzhia Oblast, and according to Ukrainian and Western military analysts, this exact sector was Russia's declared top priority for its entire spring and summer offensive in 2026. The goal was straightforward and deeply ambitious. Push Russian forces close enough to bring Zaporizhzhia city within artillery range, a major Ukrainian urban center roughly 70 kilometers from where the front currently sits. Achieving that would sever one of Ukraine's key southern corridors entirely. So Russia committed serious force to make that happen. Russian commanders threw the entire 5th Combined Arms Army into this direction, an Eastern military district formation built around the 36th, 37th, and 38th Motorized Rifle Brigades, alongside a newly reformed 55th Naval Infantry Division pulled from Russia's Pacific Fleet. When a force built for coastal assault ends up fighting over farmland hundreds of kilometers from the nearest coast, that alone tells you how much Moscow was willing to gamble on this single stretch of ground. That's a serious, committed, offensive push backed by real manpower and real intent. And it collapsed almost entirely. According to Ivan Kozin, commander of the 3rd Battalion within Ukraine's 225th Assault Regiment, speaking to Censor.net on July 20th, Russia's own 5th Combined Arms Army lost at least 2 fully staffed regiments near Relied, wiped out without ever achieving the breakthrough its own commanders had promised. In his own words, Russia's plan for a rapid breakthrough was thwarted, and the entire sector stabilized against them. 2 entire regiments, thousands of trained soldiers, and the actual line barely moved at all. The numbers behind that failure paint an even starker picture. According to ISW's assessment on July 1st, Russia seized just over 30 square kilometers across the entire Ukrainian front in June 2026. Compare that to June of the previous year, when Russia captured more than 481 square kilometers in that same single month. That's roughly a 16-fold collapse in the actual rate of Russian advance in just 12 months. And it wasn't getting cheaper for Russia either. According to figures compiled from ISW and Euromaidan Press, Russia paid nearly 1,300 casualties for every square kilometer it managed to seize in June 2026, compared to roughly 68 casualties per square kilometer during that same month a year earlier. That's close to a 19-fold increase in the human cost paid for every meter of shrinking territorial gain. So picture the actual situation Russian commanders were staring at by mid-2026. Their most important offensive of the entire year, backed by an entire combined arms army, had ground down to almost nothing, while casualties climbed to levels their own military hadn't seen in this sector before. That failure created enormous pressure, and not just a battlefield problem. Because according to Ukrainian military observers, Russian officials, including Putin and his top general Gerasimov, had been holding highly publicized briefings roughly once a month since January 2026, repeatedly claiming this exact offensive was advancing successfully. Russian state media had built its own domestic narrative around this front specifically, telling Russian citizens that victory in Zaporizhzhia was already unfolding. Except it wasn't. According to ISW, some Russian military bloggers had even started exaggerating claims publicly, with one blogger insisting Russian troops had reached the outskirts of a village called Lubitsky. ISW's own assessment found that claim was somewhere between 11 and 15 kilometers beyond where Russian forces actually stood at the time. That gap between what Russian propaganda claimed and where soldiers actually were became the exact problem Russian commanders needed to solve. Not with more artillery, not with more troops, but with footage. That's precisely why Russia sent those 64 soldiers in without real weapons in the first place. According to the 225th Regiment's own account, these men were specifically ordered to avoid all direct combat entirely. Their actual mission was locating Ukrainian drone crews for future strikes, gathering intelligence on Ukrainian positions, and above everything else, planting Russian flags for propaganda videos that would let state television claim these exact villages had already fallen. Notice what that decision actually reveals about Russia's own military leadership at this point. When a modern combined arms army, backed by an entire Eastern military district formation, cannot physically advance the front line after months of trying, but state television still needs footage proving otherwise, the solution stops being tactical. It becomes theatrical. These 64 men weren't sent to fight a battle at all. And that decision, sending soldiers to fake a victory Russia's own army couldn't actually deliver, wasn't even the most extreme option Russian commanders had already tried in this exact stretch of front. Months earlier, Russian commanders had already tried something far more extreme in this same general stretch of front, and what happened to the men ordered to carry it out is genuinely difficult to hear. According to Ukraine's 65th Separate Mechanized Brigade, in May 2026, Russian assault troops attempted to infiltrate behind Ukrainian lines on the Orikhiv axis by crawling through a massive underground gas pipeline.
Я для себя понял, что это один конец смерти.
Вы сейчас залезли, за нами заварили трубу, назад дороги нет.
They crawled not for a few hundred meters, for more than 13 kilometers, roughly 8 miles, through a metal tube barely 1 meter wide. According to Southern Defense Forces spokesperson Vladislav Voloshin, this wasn't some spontaneous idea thrown together the night before. Russian engineers had converted sections of that pipeline into an entire covert transportation system, installing communication posts, bypass tunnels, and dugouts directly inside the pipe itself. Soldiers moved through it using small handcarts and scooters in complete darkness for hours at a time. Now here's the detail that turns this from a desperate gamble into something much darker. According to captured soldiers themselves, there was no water inside that pipeline. The air inside was foul and difficult to breathe, and despite the fact that these men were crawling through an active gas transport line, they were given no gas masks at all. Picture that reality for a moment. Soldiers sent underground, into a metal tube filled with bad air, with nothing to drink, and no protective equipment against the exact gas the pipeline itself was built to carry. And then comes the detail that should genuinely disturb you more than anything else in this entire story. According to multiple captured soldiers, Russian commanders welded the pipe shut behind every single group that entered. There was no way back, none at all. Once a soldier crawled into that pipeline, retreat simply stopped being an option his own commanders had left available to him. One captured Russian serviceman, quoted in footage released by the 65th Brigade, described the moment his group finally understood what had actually happened to them. In his own words, it became clear they had been sent in as cannon fodder, and everyone already understood there was no way back, because after each group entered, the pipe was sealed shut behind them. Here's what makes this operation even more chilling. Ukraine wasn't caught off guard by any of it. According to Militarny's reporting, surrender leaflets were reportedly already scattered near the pipeline's exit points before the operation even reached its final stage, placed there in advance by Ukrainian forces who already knew precisely where this tunnel would end. Drones and Ukrainian infantry were waiting there too. According to the same captured soldiers' testimony, heavy Baba Yaga bomber drones and smaller FPV drones struck the group the moment they emerged from the pipeline. Only after those drones flew away did he hear something he wasn't expecting. In his own words, he heard voices calling out, and at first he didn't understand who it was, but then he realized they were Ukrainian soldiers. Another captured soldier from that same operation said something that should sit uncomfortably with anyone watching this unfold. He said Ukrainian troops actually treated them better than their own side ever had. Think about what that single sentence actually reveals. A soldier who just survived being sealed inside a pipe with no water and no way out, ambushed the moment he reached the surface, found more basic decency from the army fighting against him than from the commanders who sent him there in the first place. And here's the part of this story that turns one horrifying incident into an entire pattern worth paying attention to. According to United 24 media, this wasn't Russia's only pipeline infiltration attempt of the year either. This was at least the fourth known pipeline infiltration operation in 2026 alone. A nearly identical attempt failed in Ukraine's Sumy region, using a section of the Druzhba pipeline near a village called Yablunivka, repelled by Ukraine's 71st Separate Airmobile Brigade. Earlier attempts had also failed near Kupiansk, and inside Russia's own Kursk Oblast, using a section of pipeline that wasn't even operational anymore. 4 separate attempts, 4 separate failures. Russian commanders kept returning to the exact same tactic, sending their own soldiers into sealed metal tubes with no way out, and Ukrainian forces kept waiting for them at the other end every single time. So by the time Russia decided to send 64 unarmed men with cameras and flags into Zaporizhzhia months later, that decision wasn't some new low point. It was simply the next entry on a growing list of increasingly desperate tactics, each one more extreme than the last, and each one already proven to fail before Russian commanders even tried it again. That raises an uncomfortable question worth sitting with. If soldiers crawling through sealed pipelines and unarmed men filming fake victories both failed this completely, what happens when Russia turns to its most advanced weapon of the entire war instead? Technology built specifically to make human tactics unnecessary in the first place? While Russian infantry kept failing underground and behind enemy lines, Russian engineers were racing to build something that wouldn't need soldiers crawling through pipes at all, a drone so advanced it could fly and strike entirely on its own. The weapon is called the Molniya, Russian for lightning, a cheap fixed-wing kamikaze drone Russia has relied on heavily throughout this war. Russian engineers kept upgrading this exact drone every time Ukraine found a way to stop it. First came a reconnaissance variant fitted with a small computer and satellite terminal. Then, when Ukraine started jamming its GPS guidance, Russia added a simple $2 magnetic compass as a jam-proof backup. According to 1945, that was already the 4th jam-proof fix Russia had deployed on this single drone in just 6 months. Then, Russia crossed into genuinely new territory. According to Serhiy Beskresnov, an advisor to Ukraine's defense ministry and a leading expert on radio technology, Russia began mass deploying an entirely autonomous version of the Molniya directly in Zaporizhzhia. This version carries no control antenna whatsoever. It uses onboard cameras and computers to identify its own target, navigate its own approach, and strike completely without any human input during flight. Understand what that actually means. Standard drone detectors work by picking up radio signals. This drone sends out none at all, which means, according to Bezkresnov's own warning, a detector simply cannot save you anymore. Russia didn't test this quietly either. According to Ukrainian officials, 2 of Russia's most advanced drone formations were deployed specifically to Zaporizhzhia to field this exact technology. The 50th Variag Brigade, described by Ukrainian officials as one of Russia's best unmanned systems units, and the Rubicon Center, Russia's central hub for advanced drone research and deployment, both concentrated their most experimental hardware directly onto this one stretch of front. This was, by every measure, Russia's most sophisticated technological answer to a battlefield where infantry tactics kept collapsing. And then, in late June 2026, Ukrainian forces shot one down for the first time. Here's the twist that should genuinely surprise you. Ukraine's answer to an unjammable, undetectable, fully autonomous AI drone wasn't a more advanced piece of technology at all. It was a small, domestically built Ukrainian interceptor drone that simply flies directly into its target and destroys it on impact. No jamming involved, just a kinetic collision, because a drone with no radio signal has nothing left for jamming technology to actually interfere with in the first place. According to reporting on the shootdown, these same kinetic interceptors already accounted for 43% of all Molniya drones Ukraine destroyed back in March 2026 alone, well before Russia's fully autonomous version ever entered the fight. So picture the actual outcome sitting underneath all of this. Russia spent 6 months and at least 4 separate technological upgrades building a drone specifically designed to be impossible to detect or jam. Ukraine defeated it using one of the oldest principles in the history of weapons design. If it moves, and you can see it coming, you simply fly something else directly into it. Infantry crawling through sealed pipelines failed. Soldiers sent to fake a victory on camera failed. And now, Russia's most advanced autonomous weapon, built specifically to remove human vulnerability from the equation entirely, failed too. Beaten by a machine that cost a fraction of what Russia spent developing the threat, it was built to stop. That's 3 completely different approaches, tried in the exact same stretch of front, and every single one collapsed. Which raises the question that actually matters here. What does failing this many times, this consistently, in this one specific place, actually cost a military that keeps insisting, in public, that this offensive is still working exactly as planned? Every failed tactic you've just watched comes with a price tag Russia doesn't get to walk away from. And when it comes to those 64 captured soldiers specifically, that price runs far deeper than a single embarrassing headline. Start with what Ukraine actually gained in intelligence. These weren't ordinary frontline conscripts caught in a trench somewhere. According to Ukrainian officials, these were rear infiltration specialists, soldiers trained specifically to move behind Ukrainian lines undetected. That means every one of them knew something valuable. The exact routes they used to cross into Ukrainian territory, the radio frequencies and communication equipment their units relied on, the names, positions, and command structure of the handlers running their entire operation. Ukrainian intelligence now has direct access to every one of those 64 men. Every entry point, every frequency, every position they knew about, Ukraine now knows too. That's a fundamentally different kind of prize than capturing an ordinary soldier who only ever saw what was directly in front of him in a trench. Then there's the currency these men represent in an entirely different sense. According to the 225th Regiment's own commander, every single prisoner of war represents an opportunity to bring a Ukrainian defender home. Russia has now handed Ukraine 64 additional bargaining chips at a moment when prisoner exchanges remain one of the most emotionally significant issues in Ukrainian society. Ukraine's 76th exchange, completed just weeks earlier on June 26th, had already brought 160 Ukrainians home, including dozens of defenders who had survived the siege of Mariupol. Since the start of the full invasion, more than 9,500 Ukrainians have returned from Russian captivity altogether, with nearly 1,600 of those homecomings happening in 2026 alone. Now here's the twist that makes this entire operation almost darkly funny, if it weren't so serious. The entire purpose of sending these men in the first place was to produce propaganda footage, proof for Russian state television that a Ukrainian village had fallen under Russian control. That footage exists now. It's circulating on international news platforms and social media right now. It just shows the exact opposite of what it was supposed to prove. Instead of Russian soldiers standing triumphantly over a captured village, the world is watching footage of Russian soldiers surrendering in that same village, filmed by the very army they were sent to defeat. Russia built a propaganda operation, and Ukraine turned it into Ukraine's own propaganda instead. And then there's the silence, which might be the most telling detail of everything. As of the most recent available reporting, Russia's own Ministry of Defense has never publicly acknowledged that these 64 soldiers were even captured. An honest telling of this story has to include what Russia is still actively building, because this isn't a military simply giving up. Now, Russia's unmanned systems forces stood at roughly 87,000 personnel by the end of 2025, with plans to nearly double that figure to 165,000 by the end of 2026. And Russia's Rubicon Drone Center alone grew from around 1,450 personnel in early 2025 to nearly 5,000 just a year later. That's a genuinely serious, large-scale investment. But some analysts flagged something worth taking seriously. Rapid expansion at that speed has forced Rubicon to lower its own recruitment standards, and it now finds itself competing directly with other elite units like the 50th Variag Brigade for the exact same shrinking pool of technically skilled Russian recruits. Growing bigger, faster, isn't automatically the same thing as growing stronger, and Russia's own analysts studying this expansion have quietly acknowledged that risk themselves. Meanwhile, according to ISW's assessment from July 1st, Russia captured or infiltrated barely 28% as much territory across the first 6 months of 2026 as it managed during that same period the year before. And in parts of western Zaporizhzhia specifically, ISW noted that Ukrainian forces were actually advancing during the exact same window Russia was supposed to be pushing forward. Russia isn't just stuck on this front. In places, it's actually losing ground. So here's the question worth sitting with after everything you've just watched. 5 different strategies, tried and defeated on the exact same stretch of Ukrainian territory. Soldiers welded into pipelines with no way out. Men sent to fake a victory that became global proof of defeat instead. An unjammable drone beaten by a simple bullet. What does that tell you about how much longer an army can keep escalating a losing formula before it runs out of ideas entirely? And if Russia is willing to sacrifice this many soldiers just to manufacture a single video, what does that actually reveal about how desperate the men actually giving these orders have become? Let us know what you think in the comments below. None of this exists in isolation either. While all this was happening, an entirely different crisis was quietly tearing through Russia itself, one that had nothing to do with drones or infiltration tactics at all, and everything to do with something far more basic: fuel. We covered exactly how bad that shortage has actually become. Gas lines stretching past a full day, soldiers abandoning tanks because they simply ran out of fuel to move them, and Putin's own closest allies admitting the entire country has had enough. If you want to understand the other half of what's actually breaking down inside Russia's war machine right now, that video is on your screen and it's absolutely worth watching next. This is the Frontline show, and this war is moving faster than almost anyone is prepared for. We'll see you in the next one.